My name is Jason Beverlin. I work for the Nature Conservancy with our Illinois River program work. And I've got three things that I'm going to go over with you tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Nature Conservancy, just to give you a little bit of idea of the organization that I work for. I'm hopeful that many of you already know who we are, but just in case you don't, I'll give you a little bit of background on that. And then I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the Illinois River, because you really can't understand what we're doing at Emiquon unless you understand what's going on with the Illinois River system. So I'm going to spend some time talking about that. And then the bulk of my presentation will be on Emiquon. I'm going to update you on some of the things that have happened since the last time I presented to the group. We've got a lot of exciting stuff, even with COVID, we've got a lot of exciting stuff that took place this past year. So I'll update you on that as well. So with that, I will go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about the Nature Conservancy. We are a global conservation not-for-profit organization. In fact, we are the largest in the world, and we work across all of the major habitat types. So I focus in on rivers, but we also have projects on lakes, forests, grasslands, deserts, oceans, all of those things. And we work to protect ecologically important lands and waters, both for the benefit of nature and people. And those of you that have heard me speak over the years or who know a lot about the Nature Conservancy know that this people part is somewhat new. We used to kind of buy land and do restoration work and kept people off of it, but that's different for us now. We recognize that people are important, both from an understanding the work, but also we now know we can't buy all the land it's going to take to solve some of our problems. So we need more people to get behind this, more organizations, that kind of thing. So people are now a big part of our work. The Conservancy has helped protect more than 119 million acres worldwide. That's about the size of the state of California. And it's really good for someone like me who works for this organization, because it means we've got a lot of property around the world and a lot of experience around the world to bring to bear when we need it. So we're a science-based organization. We've got lots of scientists, and we've got the ability to call on them when we need help with a project. Same with stewardship and restoration. We also manage more than 100 marine projects across the globe. And we own and manage the largest network of private preserves in the United States. And I think in particular to Audubon, this might be interesting, because as we are getting more involved with people and we recognize people are important, we're opening up more of these lands. We still have a lot that are closed. We still have a lot that we think are too fragile to have public out on them. But in a lot of instances, we have areas that we can. So you'll find more and more of our preserves open to the public. We also work in more than 100 countries. We're in all 50 states. Here in Illinois, we own and manage about 19,000 acres. We are in every corner of the state. So we've got projects up in Chicago and near Chicago. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Nachusa Grasslands, which is a wonderful project. We've got Kankakee Sands. Of course, we've got our Illinois River program work and our Mackinac River work. And then we've got an entire program in Southern Illinois working on the Cache River, working on the Shawnee, and then we've got a new project called Dogtooth Bend as well that we're working on. So we're all over the state, and it keeps us pretty busy. We're a membership organization, so we have more than 1 million members worldwide, and then we work off of donations. So that's how most of our work gets done. We're not the government. We are a not-for-profit. So with that, that's all I'm going to do with a little bit about the Nature Conservancy, and I'm now going to figuratively jump into the Illinois River and talk a little bit about it. You know, this river's been important to people for a very long time. It's supported something like 600 generations of folks, and it's that natural resource that really keeps people in and around this river system. It was one of the most noted sporting grounds in the Midwest. And you can see from this picture, these folks were harvesting a lot of ducks and a lot of geese. I always joke that you got to wonder where the game warden was in this photo, or when this photo was taken. But the bottom line is that more than 100 years ago, we almost had this nature-based economy built up along our Illinois River system. So these folks weren't just hunting for recreation. They were actually feeding their families with these. They were selling some of these, so they were providing income. So this was really a nature-based economy at one point. And it wasn't just ducks and geese. It was also mussels. We were at one time the most productive mussel stream per mile in North America. That's huge. And you think about that, the most productive mussel stream per mile in North America. Today, it's hard to find mussels. You can still find mussels in the Illinois River, but nothing like you used to be able to. And if you look at this next slide, you can see lots of harvesting of mussels were taking place 100 years ago. This picture, I believe, was taken somewhere down around Meredosia or Beardstown, but the pearl button industry was a big part of what we were using these mussel shells. And there were plenty of mussels at the time to support this kind of industry. You can still find some, if you look at the picture on the left side of the screen, you can see a mussel with the holes bored in it. You can still sometimes find those along the riverbank where this industry was taking place. So big mussel population, same with fish. We harvested 24 million pounds of commercial fish out of this Illinois River in 1908. And this picture is of Havana. You can see they had almost a little town set up along the banks of the Illinois River just to deal with the fish market that was coming in from our river. And in fact, we were shipping our fish all the way up to Chicago, and other fine restaurants were serving the fish out of the Illinois River. So it was a big part of our industry and was pretty important. Nature was a big part of our entire area more than 100 years ago. So if we'd have been able to look at the river from the sky back then, this is kind of what it would have looked like. And you can see that it's really difficult to tell where the river is in this picture versus the backwater areas. It's very interconnected, very dynamic, very diverse, lots of things going on. And so this is really important from an environmental standpoint because you can see there's a lot of vegetation. It gives the fish and the birds lots of places to go. It's good habitat. It's kind of got everything you need from a nature standpoint. And in this picture, it's very easy to find the river, right? So I like to show these two, that one and then this one, because this just illustrates how much we've really changed our river system. I'm going to focus in here for the next little bit about some of the changes that have happened to the Illinois River. But before I get into that, I just want to say, I'm going to focus in on three. There was a lot of changes going on. So there was a lot of stuff that was happening about a little more than 100 years ago, late 1800s, early 1900s. But I'm going to focus in on the three big ones, mainly because of time tonight. And I really think these three had the biggest impacts on our river system. And in fact, I'm going to start our story in Chicago. If we'd have been in Chicago prior to 1871, this is how the drainage worked. And you can see that the Chicago River drained into Lake Michigan. This posed a pretty big problem for the city of Chicago because they were at this time dumping their sewer into the Chicago River, and they were getting their drinking water out of Lake Michigan. These two things didn't add up well for them. And so they engineered a solution. They actually reversed the flow of the Chicago River, constructed the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, and I guess in this case, literally flushed all of that downstream, eventually connecting up with the Illinois River. This had a major impact. Of course, we had sewage issues, so there was pollution problems, and we did have fish kills when this took place, all the way down into Peoria area. EPA standards and other things have helped regulate some of that water quality concerns that we've got. But the other thing that it did and still remains today is it actually permanently raised the water level in the Illinois River by about 3 foot. So those critical floodplains that are right next to our Illinois River system, some of those got inundated permanently because of the reversal of the Chicago River. So that was a pretty big impact. The other big impact is the lock and dam system. We have a great river that's a good river for transportation. We can actually ship goods from the Great Lakes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, but the river's not deep enough to accommodate that, so they needed to dam it up. And so they construct these locks and dams that pools water up behind them, and it keeps the water deep enough to accommodate barge traffic. The other thing it did, though, is it took a lot of floodplain and permanently put it underneath water. So we had more water coming down from Chicago, and now we permanently flooded some with this lock and dam system that we use to keep this transportation part open. So with those two changes, we started to see a pretty big impact to this nature-based economy that I talked about earlier, right? So folks were using this landscape for hunting and fishing and for economic purposes. As these changes happened, we saw a lot of those natural resources weren't doing as well. And so that economy started to collapse, and we looked to other uses for the floodplain. In this picture, everything that's kind of red is what's the floodplain, and you can obviously see the Illinois River in this picture. What they did is they constructed levee systems. These are just big earthen mounds that go parallel with the river system and prevents water from spreading out into that floodplain during a heavy rain event. So we get a lot of rain, the river comes up, and then eventually it would have spread out into this floodplain area that's red. These levees keep that from happening, and it gives us the opportunity to use these floodplains for something else. In this case, it's agriculture, but you can find industry behind these, you can find city behind these, and this was taking place all up and down the Illinois River. The Illinois River has about 400,000 acres of floodplain associated with it, and about 50% of it is now behind a levee, which means the river can rarely reach it, or sometimes doesn't reach it at all anymore. So the 50% that is still connected is getting flooded a lot more often too. So it's got kind of dual problems that this creates. So this graph actually illustrates how that flood and drought used to work for our river system. We call it the hydrology. So how the water used to fluctuate in our Illinois River system. And you can see, this is something everybody gets, right? We get more rain in the springtime, so the water gets deeper. So we get more floods in the spring. Dries out in the summer, we get less rain, and you get that low water, more stable water. These two things were really important. Those floods in the spring would help combat some invasive species, but those low water times in the summer were really critical for plant growth. So you get that low, stable water. It's good for those aquatic plants. And you used to be able to come down the Illinois River and there were plants everywhere. And these plants are kind of the basis for the system, right? They're good for birds, they're good for fish. They're really an important part of the whole ecosystem. And then you can also see we would occasionally get a flood in the wintertime. So kind of what we would call a winter bump. And this graph shows how the river functions today. And I think the only thing that's consistent here is how inconsistent it is. So you can see we do still get floods in the springtime, but we're also getting some pretty big and severe floods in the summer and in the wintertime. This causes a lot of problems because that's one of the reasons you don't see a lot of that vegetation anymore along the sides of the river, because we're stacking water on top of it at times where it's not supposed to be there. And so this creates a lot of threats for us. Of course, it's got water quality issues. We're funneling a lot of water off of the land very quickly. We talked about the Chicago Sanitary Canal, but we also have sediments that come with this and other things that can travel down these systems. And of course, you've got a lot of sedimentation in the river. Sedimentation is normal for the Illinois River, but not at the volume that we have today. I just mentioned the lack of vegetation. So the river would dry out. In fact, there would have been times in Peoria more than 100 years ago where you could almost walk across the Illinois River during some summers. So having low water with mudflats could be a good thing. The problem is we wind up stacking water on top of those mudflats so deep that the plants can't grow, and you wind up with kind of a river that's devoid of vegetation in a lot of areas. And although it's not very good for native species, it's turned out that the environment we've created is really good for some of our invasive species. Of course, we've got the big head and the silver carp, you've got zebra mussels, and you've got purple loosestrife. So all of these things have thrived in this river system that we've created. And there are other issues as well, like flooding.
So here we are in downtown Peoria, Illinois, a couple hours south of Chicago, and we're witnessing the flood of record. I've worked on the Illinois River here for more than 20 years and have never seen anything like this. It's taken a heavy toll on the Peoria area community and towns and cities up and down river. So we're here at the Emiquon Preserve, and we're seeing our levee overtop with peak flood event on the Illinois River, the first time since 1943 and the largest flood in history. What's happening is it's allowing this backwater area to fill with these floodwaters and potentially having an impact on neighboring areas along the Illinois River. We're seeing flood events like this more often these days. On 2011 on the Missouri, and then on the Mississippi River system, and today on the Illinois River. Largest events of record. Scientists look at climate models and predict that they'll continue to happen, increasing in severity and frequency. It's time that we take a different approach to managing these floods. We need dams and levees. We need to protect our cities and urban areas, but we also need room for the river. We need to create places like this where we can take floodwaters and have it a positive impact in terms of lowering flood crests for nearby cities and towns. We need to work with nature and not against it. In areas like this at Emiquon, a nature preserve, or agricultural areas along the river provide that opportunity. But we need policies that create incentives for local landowners to undertake that kind of a management approach, to take water on and potentially reduce flood heights for nearby cities and towns. Studies have shown that $1 spent on mitigation today can save $4 for taxpayers in the future.
So many of you may know Michael Reuter. He used to be with the Illinois chapter. He's now our division director. And I think he said it best in there that we need room for the river. That's really what's important here, is to provide that river a place to go during these large flood events. And you don't have to take our word for it. We've done a lot of research on this river. We know a tremendous amount about what's happening out there from a hydrologic standpoint, and other as well. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Natural Resources, the Nature Conservancy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, on and on. A lot of these folks have done research on this river. And the bottom line is, if we can restore that river with its floodplain, we can do a lot to improve the health of our river system. So anywhere we can do a reconnection, so to speak, of the river with its floodplain, we can really improve the system. And there's a lot of benefits from doing this. Of course, we've already talked a little bit about providing habitat for native plants and animals, but it also contributes to that more natural hydrology. So it gives water a place to go, keeping it out of towns and other places. It improves our water quality. It facilitates infiltration of groundwater. We can also store and process nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which is causing a lot of problems in the Gulf of Mexico. And of course, sequester carbon, which can help with climate change. And then finally, it provides opportunities for recreation, education, and economic development. So lots of benefits from these backwater floodplain areas. And that's what's led the Nature Conservancy to Emiquon. That's what led us to do this project. We're really interested in that functional floodplain. Some of you may remember that we purchased this, what we call our Emiquon Preserve, in 2000. It was formerly known as Wilder Farms, or that's how a lot of folks knew it. It was the largest private conservation land acquisition in the history of Illinois, and still is today. So it was a big deal for us, and a big risk for the Nature Conservancy at the time, because it was a pretty expensive project to undertake. This is kind of the map, just to get you oriented a little bit about where we're located. Since Dennis said some of you folks may not be from the Peoria area, may not be familiar with us, so I'm going to start with the lower right-hand side, the map of Illinois. You can see there's a red blob on that. That red blob is Fulton County. That's the county that Emiquon is located in. We're about 4 hours south of Chicago and about 2.5 hours north of St. Louis. We're obviously in the west central part of the state. If you look at the larger map, you can see I've got the Emiquon Preserve labeled. Everything in that light green color is what belongs to the Nature Conservancy today. It's about 6,700 acres. And you can see there are two lakes on the property, Thompson Lake and Flag Lake. You can also see the Illinois River traverses off to the right or to the east of our property. So we've got about 6.5 miles of shore that we share with the Illinois River. Just across the Illinois River from us, so again, on the right side of the map, you can see Chautauqua National Wildlife Refuge. This is owned and managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They also own the Emiquon National Wildlife Refuge, which is to the south and west of us. And then you can also see we've got Dixon Mounds Museum. This is a 60,000 square foot Native American natural history museum. All total in this little stretch, the Illinois River Valley, we have almost 14,000 acres of land in conservation management. So from a conservation standpoint, it's outstanding. And we work with all of our partners down here to make sure that we're trying to manage at least on the same page, so that if Chautauqua was going to have a low water year, maybe we would have a high water year, that kind of thing. For folks visiting us, it's also a great opportunity because all of us have hiking trails. We have interpretive signs. We're fortunate to have the museum right next door that also has interpretation inside the building. They also just constructed a bunch of hiking trails as well. So it's a great place to come and visit, to learn a lot about nature and learn a lot about all of us, including the partners that are in the area here. Okay, so if we'd have been at Emiquon, again, more than 100 years ago, this is what it would have looked like. And the green line on this map is our property boundary, and I've laid it over this historic map just to give you an idea of what it would have looked like. You can see that Thompson and Flag Lake are labeled on this map. You can kind of see the Illinois River. I hope you can see my cursor. The Illinois River is right here. One of the things I want you to pay particular attention to is all the lakes that are all over through here. So you've got the Grass Lake, which if you look to the right of the screen, if you look kind of to the bottom of the screen, you see Dogfish Lake and Quiver Lake and another Grass Lake, and you've got Liverpool Lake. This was a very diverse, dynamic system. They were all, a lot of these lakes were interconnected with each other. They were all interconnected with the river. So fish could move back and forth in lower water. Of course, when we had floods, it would all spread out through here. So this was a very dynamic system. And this is what it looked like when we purchased the property in 2000. So again, the green line here represents the property that the Nature Conservancy owns today. And you can again see, hopefully you can see my cursor, you can see the Illinois River right through here. In probably about 1924, 1925, the owners of this property constructed a levee, where my cursor is, all this area, that isolated Emiquon from the Illinois River. So this levee was constructed and the river could no longer flood in here on most flood events. They also dug about 16 miles of ditches internal to the property that all terminated right here where my cursor is now. And from about 1924, 1925 until 2007, water was pumped out of here into the Illinois River to keep this dry so that they could do agriculture. They also diverted all of the streams that used to flow in here. They all went around the levee systems as well too. So basically the water they were pumping out was rainwater that landed on the property. If you look around us, you can see this was not unique. This was taking place, all of those wetlands that were next to us were drained and levees were constructed. And again, this was happening all up and down the Illinois River system. So this is what it looked like when we bought it. This is what it looked like when I started in 2005. There were 40 buildings on the property, lots of infrastructure. It was mostly ag land. And it was our task to try to get it from this to as close to this historic map as we possibly could. And so the first thing we did was a lot of planning. And I promise you, this is the most boring slide I've got, but it was the only thing I could think of to represent planning. So we got a lot of people together and we did science planning, we did stewardship planning, we did visitor use planning. The science planning was pretty critical. We pulled together a group of scientists from around the country to help us think through what do we need to monitor at Emiquon? What are the targets we need to be thinking about at Emiquon to know if we're doing a good job? how do we know if we're being successful? How do we know if we need to make changes to our management? So this key ecological attributes document helps us do that. We also did a stewardship plan, and this is an oversimplification of that, but it just gives you an idea. We really sat down, we looked at old maps, we looked at some of the GLO maps, and really tried to figure out what was on the property prior to all the changes that have taken place to the river. And then we developed a plan to install these habitat types. One of the big things that we did was we knew from the beginning, after working with these scientists, that we wanted some sort of relationship with the river. We wanted to be able to connect to the river in some meaningful way. So with all these plans in place, we got started on our restoration work. And so this is what it looked like in about 2006. And you can see the Illinois River is off to the right of your screen. We're looking north. All of this, most of the land that you see that's kind of that greenish color is Emiquon Preserve. And within a couple of years, we look like this. And again, you can see the Illinois River off to the right. We're looking north. We're obviously in an airplane in this picture. I like this picture. I know it's a winter, so you're not seeing a lot of the greens and a lot of the vegetation, but the reason I like it is you can see how closely this water that returned looks like those historic lakes. If I lay over that historic map, you can see those lake beds were still there. That Thompson and Flag Lake was still there. And basically all we did was turn the pumps off at this point. We didn't have any ability to manage yet. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff from a water management standpoint. We turned the pumps off. Those lake beds were still there and ready to go. We also found that the plants were there. So we did a little bit of wetland plantings when we purchased the property, but not much. Most of that, either the seed source was already there or the wind blew it in. So things like ironweed, you've got blue flag iris, you've got cattails, you've got the primrose, arrowhead, Alodia, which is really important. This is that that submerged aquatic vegetation that's really good for fish habitat. Pickerelweed, and of course the iconic American lotus. We've got acres and acres of these at Emiquon during the summer months. So the wetland plants came back. The fish were a different story. We worked with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources to stock about 2.2 million fish into Emiquon. We did things like crappie and bass, so the game type fish, but we also really worked on those ancient backwater fish like bowfin, which just flashed and is what Theron was holding, or the spotted gar, which is what Sally is holding that just flashed. And I'm happy to report, and you can tell by the picture there on the left of the screen, she's wearing a mask. That's because in 2020, we were able to stock alligator gar into the system, about 40 of them. We did that in cooperation with the Department of Natural Resources and the Illinois River Biological Station. She's holding one that's about 13 inches. If you look at the lower left picture, you can see what their teeth look like. These are a pretty cool fish. They can get big. They can get to be as big as, they've had some as big as 300 pounds. They can get as big as 10 foot long. That fish was not released into Emiquon. I just wanted to give you an idea of what they look like. But these were a native fish. They're our largest native fish. They were pretty much extinct back in the 90s. They couldn't find them anymore, so they started to do this restocking program, and it's a really cool fish, and we're happy to be a part of that program. And we're happy to be able to do that in 2020. We also have about 600 acres of prairie, about 400 acres of tall grass, and about 200 acres of wet prairie. And even again with COVID, we were able to fire on the preserve this year.
All right, Sharon, I think the fire is run.
10-4, I'm just watching for whirls on this side. You're going to get some pretty intense behavior here right when it wraps up.
We also undertook a big tree planting back in 2007 where we planted about 300,000 trees. And again, I'm happy to report that in 2020, we planted another about 27,000 trees at Emiquon. So we're looking at pushing around 330,000 total trees that have gone in the ground. We've done things like sycamore and a variety of oaks, but we also did a lot of pecans. If you looked at this area historically, Emiquon all the way over to Havana into the Chautauqua area, this was a giant pecan grove. They were everywhere. And in fact, we still have a couple of remnant pecan trees at Emiquon. So that was a big part of the mix that we installed. It was also a good year for us and our partners. We worked with the Peoria Park District, with Illinois Audubon, and the Wetland Initiative to secure an NCCC AmeriCorps team this past fall. And they did work at a lot of Peoria Park District sites, but they also came down to Emiquon and spent several weeks. So it's a great partnership. All of us working together are able to attract this AmeriCorps program, and we get good works done on all of our properties here in the area, which is pretty important. I know you folks are all interested in birds, and I know many of you come down to Emiquon and can tell me a lot about all the birds that you're seeing. So, but I still want to spend a little bit of time on it. Everybody laughs because I like to start with the American coot, but I think it's an important bird for Emiquon. It's actually one of the reasons why we are a wetland of international importance. We can have somewhere around 7% of the continental population of the American coot at Emiquon. So that's a pretty big deal. I also think they have pretty cool looking babies. We also have a lot of eagles at Emiquon, and we work with Forbes Biological Station. I know many of you are familiar with them. They do the aerial inventories on a weekly basis through the entire Illinois River Valley and part of the Mississippi River Valley. And they're mostly looking for waterfowl, but they also count eagles when they see them. And you can see from this chart, we started restoration in 2007, and you can see that the eagle sightings on our property have really gone up. And in fact, in 2019, we saw more than 300 eagles in one day at Emiquon. So it just shows you, if you build it, they will come and they use it. We've got the food they need. We've got the habitat that they're looking for. And so we're seeing a lot of these birds come through. And I like this picture because these are the actual trees that are sitting in our public use area. So if you come down and visit, come to our public use area, you can see eagles right from that spot. We also have large numbers of birds. I know many of you have seen snow geese, so this is maybe not new to you, but I still get fascinated to see. This was 350,000 snow geese all at one time at Emiquon. This was in, I think, 2019 when I took this video. And we know it was 350,000 because Forbes had flown over just a little bit before I took this to do a bird count. So lots of birds utilizing the preserve. Same with waterfowl come through for the fall and spring migrations, and we'll have hundreds of thousands of ducks and other kinds of geese all over during these times of year. We've got cormorants. These trees that you can see in this picture, these used to line the ditches. They were just kind of remnants from the farm operation. A lot of these trees have fallen at this point, but you can see they were using it as a rookery. And they now actually are nesting on the ground, which is pretty cool to see. You can see all of the kind of the black dots there on the ground are the cormorants. And again, I like the way their young look. So it's a pretty interesting bird. And we have American bitterns, we have least bitterns, we've got research that's going on all of these things. We've got egrets. My favorite bird is the black-necked stilt, and we actually see a lot of them, and they actually hang out in our public use area quite a bit. We'll have thousands of pelicans. You can see those on the Illinois River in lots of places. So I know we're seeing more and more of them, but we'll have as many as 6,000 or 7,000. And these guys will stick around to the bitter end. I've got pictures of them walking around on the ice. So they'll stick around as long as they possibly can. But we also have other things at Emiquon that you might be interested in. I'm happy to report that we have bobcat sightings. We've had several this year. If you look at the lower right-hand picture, the one that's in black and white, you can see that bobcat's wearing a collar, so it's getting tracked by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. The upper one was taken during the day, and it's also at Emiquon up in one of our upland areas. One of the things I'll say is that lower black and white photo was taken very near our public use area, and these these critters, although they're mostly nocturnal during the summer, spring months, maybe early fall, once they get into winter, they're moving around more during the daytime. So it's possible if you're in our public use area, you could see one of these because we do have one that's hanging around there. Same thing with otter. We have a lot of otter on the property. We've done a lot of research on otters, and by we, I mean our partners have done that. And they're a pretty interesting creature as well. They are almost entirely nocturnal during those warmer months, but in the wintertime, they almost completely reverse. So it's very possible to see them moving around, especially if we've got some open water at Emiquon during the daytime at Emiquon. You probably wouldn't see a muskrat in the wintertime, but you certainly will see them during the summer months, and you can see their iconic dens that they have. Again, if you decide to come down in the winter, it's pretty easy to spot these. And if there's ice, you may be able to get out and take a little bit of a closer look as well. And of course, we've got amphibians, reptiles, we've got all kinds of mammals. And then we've got some things that folks don't always think about, but they're really, really important to the overall system. We have this is green algae, it's called Volvox. We've got, you know, literally millions of these things in the water. They're an important part of the food chain. We've got these rotifers, this bronchionus. This thing is really important. This thing is an animal, and it's a primary food source for those fry fish, for those tiny fish. So these things are really a critical part. And we have a lot of research that's taken place on this, both from the Nature Conservancy, Dr. Maria Lemke, but also with the University of Illinois at Springfield. All right, so we have all this wonderful restoration. And then you also heard me talk a lot about the hydrology. For us to be able to manage our water level, we needed some way to control that. So to be able to de-water at the right times and re-water at the right times. And so we built what we call our water management structure. And this is a picture of it. This is an aerial view here. This one here is more of a close-up view where my cursor's at now. You can see there are two concrete culverts. This is our levee system. So this is Emiquon, the river's on the other side of the levee. And these two box culverts allow us to gravity flow water out of Emiquon into the Illinois River or vice versa. And then all of this equipment that's stacked on top of it, that's screens. And those screens help us prevent fish passage and other things from moving, organisms from moving back and forth. Again, I'm happy to report, oh, sorry, I forgot about this. So our goal, just to remind folks, is that we want to try to manage Emiquon as close to this hydrograph as we can. So that springtime flood, summer dry out sort of thing. Maybe we can't do it every year, but as often as we can, we want to try to manage like this. That's really good for the ecology. And I'm happy to report that in 2016, we were able to do a major drawdown at Emiquon. And I've got a video here that shows you, that shows us pumping. And then I'll talk a little bit about how much water we lost, that kind of thing, when we're done with the video. So you can see Illinois River's at the bottom of the screen. Emiquon's at the top. Again, we've got our label, our levee labeled here, and that's what isolates us from the Illinois River. The water that you see pouring out now is pumps, and that's all part of the water control structure that we built. I mentioned the concrete culverts. There's two of them that go through the levee. That gives us the ability to gravity flow water out of Emiquon or into Emiquon if we need it. A lot of times the river is too high for us to gravity flow water out of Emiquon. So we also installed two electric pumps. They each pump 30,000 gallons per minute. And that's what we used this past summer to do our drawdown at Emiquon. So if you'd have been at Emiquon in June, this is what it would have looked like. This light blue color was where we had water on the preserve. It was about 4,500 surface acres of water, about 6.1 billion gallons. We started pumping in June. We stopped in August, and we had reduced our surface acres by about 63%. We had about 1,600 surface acres of water remaining, or about 1.4 billion gallons of water out there. So if you look at the picture on your left, you can see that was taken in June. You can see all the water that was there. And then if you look at the one on the right, that was taken in August, and you can see all of that great vegetation that came up. So we lowered the water levels, we exposed those mud flats, we compacted sediments, we gave good bird food for some of those mud flats, some nesting areas and other things. But then we also had this great vegetation come back, and we were able to rehydrate that a little bit in the fall, and we had a perfect conditions for waterfowl to fly through. So it was a really good situation for us. We were pleased with the results. We're lucky that the University of Illinois at Springfield has built a field station on our campus at Emiquon, and they've got a classroom, they've got lab space, they've got dorm rooms, and they really help us with the research. They help us attract researchers to do different research projects, which we do somewhere around 20 or 30 different research projects every year. Things with Forbes Biological Station, looking at birds, looking at the vegetation that's important for birds, looking at bird nesting. We work with the Illinois River Biological Station. They also look at the vegetation and the fish. We actually have what we call our Yellow Springs instruments that are throughout the wetland that kind of give us some water chemistry, gives us dissolved oxygen, can give us water clarity, those kind of things. All of that research then helps us make our management decisions as we move forward with Emiquon. And we're pretty proud of our research, and it's been recognized. The scientific journal that's Hydrology did a special edition just on the research at Emiquon. So this came out in about, I think, 2017, 2018, and we're pretty proud of this. Every year we do an Emiquon Science Symposium. It's coming up this year. It's going to be on April 7th. And if folks are interested in attending that, I can get the link to Dennis at some point, and he can share it with you all if you're interested in attending it. But it's a great session. We also have public use areas, and those remained open all year and continue to be open. This red circle shows you where those areas are located. It's right off of 7897. Very easy to find. We do visitor use for a whole host of reasons, but the three big ones are to build support for conservation, to provide us a place to demonstrate our restoration and share our science. And then we hope that folks go out, say good things about Emiquon, and we'll see more of them up and down the river. It's easy to find. As I said, it's right off of 7897. You look for this big sign. The area is open year round. We don't require permits, and it's open from sunrise to sunset. We've got two observatories, the Lakeside Observatory, which has the sun and rain shelter. I'm guessing many of you have seen this already. And we also have interpretive materials or signage inside these structures. I've got another structure at our Wetland Observatory. And it's got the two-story observation platform, which can give you a view of about 60–70% of the entire wetland, which is pretty good. And in the summer months, it's nice because it gets you up above the vegetation some. We have about 2 miles of hiking trail. We've got a great boardwalk. You can get out over the water, see what's going on beneath the surface, that kind of thing. And we get somewhere around 40 or 50,000 people per year. We get a lot of folks coming out, especially during that fall migration. We also allow boating and fishing. This all takes place on Thompson Lake. We do typically require permits, but because of COVID, we've suspended that for last year, and we're continuing to suspend that. We don't allow gas-powered motors. You can't even have one on the boat, and we don't allow bank fishing. It's really a great place to boat and canoe because we don't have large motor boats zipping around all over the place. It makes it a lot more enjoyable. All right, last but not least, I'm going to spend just a few minutes on the new office. We did construct this completed this in 2018. It is a gold level LEED certified, which is just leadership in energy and environmental design. Of course, it's got offices. We've got a smart classroom in it. We've got a lab space, dorm room, and a maintenance shop. So we've got kind of everything that we need to do the day-to-day business. And in addition, we've got 80 solar panels on site. These solar panels provide enough electricity to power the entire building. We haven't paid an electric bill at Emiquon since we opened this facility in 2018. We have to pay a meter charge, but we haven't paid for the electricity. And we didn't skimp on things in the maintenance shop, for example. So we still have a welder. We still have all the equipment that you need for a regular maintenance shop. and we're still producing enough power to be able to supply all that. Part of the reason is because we installed what we call a biomass stove, which is this large wood stove. When we're doing timber stand improvement, we've got to cut down invasive species. We used to leave that stuff lay. We now bring it back to the office and we use it to heat both the maintenance shop and the office area. This is an interior picture. We worked with Whiskey City Salvage here in Peoria. They actually brought in recycled wood. This wood actually came out of the old Joe's Crab Shack that was tore down on the riverfront. So we were able to do that, which helped with the LEED certification. We have a car charging station. And then we also have a geothermal heating system with 3 400-foot wells. And we got a rainwater collection system that collects rainwater from the roof. And I have a virtual tour, but I'm not sure we're going to have time to get into that. If we have time at the very end and folks want to see it, I can do that. But I think that concludes my presentation, and I'm at a point where I can answer any questions.
Well, we had one question came in, talked about the cliff swallow nests on the observatories are very wonderful.
Yep. We've got them, both of them have a lot of them. And in fact, we get a lot of them down at our water control structure as well.
During one trip a little while back, I noticed there was some talk that there was a sharp decrease in the number of muskrats out at Emiquon for a while. Did you care to comment on what the situation was with the muskrat downturn?
We don't know exactly. Well, we do kind of know what happened. We actually had a huge decrease in our cattails. And as you know, the muskrats move in and about, they use the cattails for their nests. So we saw a decline in the cattails, and subsequently we saw a decline in the muskrats. We don't know exactly why we saw such a huge decline in our cattails for a couple of years. We think it may have been because the water got deep, but that doesn't entirely answer the question. It could have been that they were getting overly cut down by the muskrats. We had a tremendous muskrat population. Some of you may remember that. There was a while where you couldn't walk 10 foot without seeing one. So we don't know, but we did have some folks taking a look at it, and we just never came to any clear conclusions. I will say the cattails are starting to come back, and we're starting to see more muskrats.
Another question was, have you had any luck in getting barn owls?
We have not. We've put some of those well, I call them boxes out, but we just have not had anything use them. So we haven't had any. I want to say that Dixon Mounds had some success, but we haven't had any specifically at Emiquon.
Another question or comment was, there's been quite a history on the Native American activity out at Emiquon. Any comments on that?
Yeah, so for about a decade, we worked with Dixon Mounds Museum and Michigan State University, and they did an archaeological dig up on the ridge in an old village site. They really learned a tremendous amount about the native peoples that were here. And if you tune in to our Emiquon Science Symposium on April 7th, Jody O'Gorman, who was one of the lead researchers for that, is going to do a presentation on some of the things that they learned. But it's still an important part. We still work with Dixon Mounds all the time. That 10 years of research has ended, but they're now just processing all the data that they've collected.
Okay. Another question was, how do you utilize citizen volunteers and or retired science professionals?
Yeah, so we obviously, there's a lot of ways to get involved. We do have volunteer programs. We have a lot during non-COVID times, we have volunteer work days. We also are always in the need of scientists. So if there's a scientist that would like to help out, all they've got to do is reach out to me and we'll figure out how we can get them involved.
Okay. Another question regarding graduate student opportunities. I want to know if they exist for U of I students, or could you cite a few specific examples of studies that have been done?
So could you, I'm sorry, I missed part of that. Could you repeat that for me?
What graduate student opportunities exist for U of I students, And are there any specific examples of studies that have been done by graduate students at the U of I?
Yeah, so the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, they've done some economic research at Emiquon, and they use graduate students for a lot of that. The University of Illinois at Springfield, who built the field station at Emiquon, we have their grad students are there all of the time doing all kinds of things. So we actually for a while had a grad student that was helping to run part of the field station. They help us do some education programs. They're doing research. In fact, U of I Springfield's got a big research project going on with squirrels. They've also got things with osprey that are going on, and interns are living in the field station and going out and doing osprey studies. So quite a bit. Specifically, the Conservancy, we just revamped our internship program, and I don't know the details of that yet, but we do actively participate in an internship program when we have one. I will also say that we will have a seasonal position that will be open starting in June, and that's another good way for you know, grad students and even undergraduate students if they want to get their foot in the door, sort of thing.
Another comment was Emiquon Corps of Discovery is a group of volunteer citizens documenting the restoration since 2005, and they are not as active anymore, but they still welcome new members. So there is an Emiquon Corps of Discovery.
Yeah, and actually, that's a pretty important group to us. They do still go out. They're still documenting change. It's different maybe than a science research kind of thing. They're documenting it from a photo standpoint and a writing standpoint, and others art and other things. We use their material all the time. They've been documenting stuff since long before restoration happened. It's our 20th anniversary, and a lot of the images that we're using to celebrate the 20th anniversary, the Emiquon Corps of Discovery has done. So it's really an important part of the program. They help us out a lot. And that's a good way to get involved, especially if that's your interest. I don't know, is Jane on the call? I think Jane's on the call. She's somebody that they could talk to, Jane Ward, and they'd be able to point them in the right direction.
Jane Ward was the one that provided the question. So
good.
Another question was, are there any hiking trails beyond those that you showed?
Not that you can't get on without special permission. That being said, if you have an occasion where you'd like to do some sort of a group hike, you can reach out to me, and sometimes we can accommodate that. That could be another good reason to join the Emiquon Corps Discovery, because they do get some access to some of that as well. But we will make special arrangements, especially with Audubon groups, to come out and walk on some of the areas that we don't allow the public.
Okay. Are there any wildlife web cameras that do live streaming?
So the University of Illinois at Springfield has their camera trap program, and I think it's down at the moment, but they actually do have all of these images, and they're looking for people to help identify what's in some of these images because they're getting so many of them. As far as like having a webcam or something like that, our internet connectivity down there is a real problem. And so that's been difficult hurdle for us to jump.
Okay. Besides fish and mussels, are there other non-native or invasive species that are an issue at Emiquon?
Well, purple loosestrife is a problem. We do spend, so that's a plant that we're spending a lot of time on. We do have Eurasian milfoil. We think managing our water levels will help with that. So there's a lot of invasives that we're working on. We've of course got the bush honeysuckle that we're trying to contain. So it's a never-ending battle for us. I would say we spend a good part of our stewardship season fighting invasive species.
Okay. Another question is, do you use Ebert information in any official capacity for Emiquon?
We use Ebert not in an official way. We do use Ebert to help us know what folks are seeing, but we have a contract with Forbes Biological Station. So a lot of the bird research that you see cited is coming from them. But we do use Ebert as far as getting an idea of what folks are seeing out on the ground.
Okay. One comment is the levee is closed to the public mostly, but Audubon field trips, at least those with pre-COVID, have had access. And I can state that Peoria Audubon has partnered with the Peoria Park District before for birding the Illinois River field trips. And there have been a few occasions when we actually did go out on the levee with
Yep.
it, have a different view.
Yeah, and I think years ago, we did some tours with it as well. So it could be that if Peoria Audubon, once we get through COVID, wanted to come out and would like to see the water control structure firsthand, we could take you out there and let you see it.
Okay. I would point out that in the chat feature, Jane Ward has posted a couple of links with regards to a Facebook page for the Corps of Discovery groups. And so anybody interested in pursuing that, you can click some of the links in the chat feature. And with that, I don't have any other questions, but some people are commenting on, they really appreciate your talk. Yeah, it's been quite informative. There's always plenty to discover, and there's always more that's out there than what you may first notice. And so that's why such discovery is so enlightening sometimes. So people are commenting that wonderful. Thank you very much. And on behalf of Peoria Audubon Society, we do really appreciate your taking the time to talk about the wonders of Emiquon, as well as what the future entails and how you're continuing to be there for the future.